Alright, hey everybody, I'm Madison, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about bone healing and the effects of compression towards faster bone healing. So, I chose this topic of the bone healing process because when I was younger, I fractured my talus bone and my ankle in 3 different places, and it took about 12 weeks of wearing a cast and brace, so 8 weeks of wearing a cast and 4 weeks of wearing a brace before I could really walk normally again. And I've always wanted to understand more about how our bones heal and if there was any way to speed up the bone healing process. So that's why I chose this topic. And I wanted to point out the picture on the right there. It's a picture of a humerus break, which the experimental study that I'll get into later is about humerus breaks in rabbits. So we'll get into that later. Alright, so some interesting facts for you guys about bones is that, did you know that approximately 6 million Americans suffer from at least one broken bone every year? So that may sound crazy, but if you think about kids falling off playgrounds and car accidents and all the other injuries that could possibly happen, they just continue to add up. So chances are that you know someone or you yourself have broken a bone in the past year. Another interesting fact is nicotine use can slow down your body's ability to heal, especially compared to a non-smoker. So any ingestion of nicotine, whether it be cigarettes, cigars, a patch, chew tobacco, whatever, it can negatively impact the healing process. And another interesting fact for you guys is that many people mistakenly doubt they have a broken bone because they can still move that part of their body. However, ability to move isn't a sure indicator of a broken bone, as the only way to confidently identify a fracture is with an x-ray. So broken bones are almost always movable, but obviously it might hurt to move, and symptoms come along with broken bones such as tenderness, bruising, and difficulty bearing weight, which are also different factors that might point to a bone fracture. So who can help? Well, for starters, orthopedic experts and surgeons can help by diagnosing the damage done to the bone and by resetting the bone into place for the healing process to begin. Surgeons are a last resort. Surgery is a last resort for when it comes to fixing a bone. They'd rather reset it and try and have the healing process occur on its own than have to put screws or whatnot in your bone to help it heal. Other people that can help include physical therapists and personal trainers, and they can help by getting the client back to normal after the healing process by doing exercises to build up the strength and range of motion of wherever their injury site was. Also, family and friends can help. They can help during the recovery process by providing support and by helping doing everyday tasks that might become difficult due to injury. So an overview of what we're going to be talking about today is, the first article that I have is Principles of Bone Healing by Calfas. And that's just a study article that's an overview about the structure of bones, the basics of bone healing process, and just all about bone fractures. So we're going to cover some terminology that you guys might need to know to understand everything. We're going to go over bone biochemistry, which is just what makes up the bone. And we're going to talk about the bone healing process, which is a 3-stage process towards bone healing. And then we're going to go into what's well known and what needs further investigation when it comes to bone healing. And then the experimental study that I'm going to talk about later is the effect of static compression on the progression of bone healing, an experimental study done on rabbits. So for that, we're going to go over the participants and the methods, the results, conclusions, strengths and limitations, all of that stuff. And then I'm going to give you guys some take-home points, and if you guys have any questions at any time, feel free to jot them down. Make sure to post them on the discussion board, and I will answer them as soon as I possibly can. So let's get started. So for the principles of bone healing, some terminology that you guys might need to know. An obvious one, what a bone is. A bone is dynamic biological tissue composed of metabolically active cells that are integrated into a rigid framework. So, so then you're also going to need to know what an osteoid is, which I'll get into later. So osteoid is an unmineralized organic matrix secreted by osteoblasts, and it consists of non-collagenous proteins, glycoproteins, proteoglycans, peptides, carbohydrates, and lipids. Like I said, I'll talk about osteoids later and how they help throughout the bone healing process. First, we're going to talk about bone biochemistry, which is just what the bone is made up of, which is organic and inorganic elements. And the weight of the bone is 20% water, 65 to 70% inorganic calcium phosphate, and 30 to 35% organic matrix of fibrous protein and collagen, which is what I have pointed out in the picture on the right in the circle. That's that organic matrix that makes up the bone. And within that matrix is the organic calcium phosphate in the water. So something you should also know is that mineralization of osteoids causes the bone to be strong and rigid, which is very important when it comes to healing. So bone mineralization is the process by which mineral crystals are deposited in an organized fashion. And the mineralization of the osteoids, which are unmineralized organic, which is an mineralization of osteoids, which is an unmineralized organic matrix done by inorganic mineral salts, gives the bone its strength and rigidity. So that's why osteoids are so important when it comes to healing the bone, because that strength and rigidity builds up toughness and stiffness and fracture loading. So it's very important that your bone be strong and rigid. So now we're going to talk about the bone healing process. So the bone healing process is all meant to restore tissue to original physical and mechanical properties. So the healing occurs in 3 different stages: inflammatory, repair, remodeling. And I have pictures on the right of those 3 different stages. Inflammation is inflammatory, the bone production is repair, and remodeling is remodeling. So during the inflammatory stage, a hematoma develops within the fracture site during the first few days, which is why the most critical period of bone healing is the first 1 to 2 weeks of inflammation, because that's when that hematoma is growing and it's getting ready for the bone to heal itself. So it starts by inflammatory cells entering the fractured site, which causes the formation of tissues, which leads to the beginning of bone healing and starts the repair stage. So those inflammation cells entering and then that tissue growing, that's telling the repair stage that it's ready for the bone to heal itself. And during the repair stage, it's the stage when the osteoids are mineralized to form a soft callus around the repair site and build on the bone's strength and rigidity. So this stage takes about 4 to 6 weeks. It's the most critical stage. And it's the 4 to 6 weeks depends on how much immobilization and adequate protection from a brace that a person has to allow the soft callus to form and harden. That way a bridge of woven bone, as you can see in the picture, comes together to bring the bone back together. And the remodeling stage is the final stage. This is where the fracture healing is completed and the healing bone is returned to its original shape, structure, and mechanical strength. So remodeling occurs over months to even years and is facilitated by stress on the bone. So while it takes months to even years for the bone to fully heal, adequate strength, so the strength that's about normal, is typically achieved in 3 to 6 months after remodeling. So this process is not a quick process. This is a long time for your bone to fully heal. So you might get that brace off in 12 weeks and ready to play your sports again or whatever, but your bone is not fully back to what it was. So now we're going to go into some well known and what needs further investigation about bones. So what is well known is what I've covered on previous slides, the 3 stages of bone healing and bone biochemistry, so what the bone is made of. Some things that need further investigation are, by what time is the bone completely healed? Like, they said months to even years, but we don't have an exact time frame. Obviously, it's going to be different for everybody because everybody's bodies reacts differently, but you think that we would be able to narrow it down some more. And another thing is, what are reasons that cause bone to not heal entirely or fail to heal completely? So it's known that sometimes the bone doesn't completely return to original state, but it's never really explained or questioned why. Why didn't it go back to completely normal if it's healed? What happened throughout the healing process that made it this way? Those are just some things that we could look into further. So now, if you guys have any questions, remember to write them down and post them in the discussion board. I'll answer them as soon as I can. And for now, we're going to go on to the second part of this presentation, which is the experimental study. So the experimental study, the effect of static compression on the progression of bone healing, an experiment done on rabbits. So the purpose of this experiment was to evaluate the effect of static compression on the progression of mid-diaphyseal bone healing. And that mid-diaphyseal bone is a rabbit's bone that is similar to a human's humerus bone. Hopefully that makes sense. So more specifically, to identify potential effects of repeated static compression applied through an external fixation system on bone healing process using an experimental model of controlled osteotomy in rabbits. So the participants were 36 5-month-old white male white New Zealand rabbits. And the rabbits were actually grouped because they had a mean weight of 3.2 kilograms. And they took those rabbits and they divided them into 3 groups. So those 3 groups were going to be used, one group at 3 weeks, one group at 6 weeks, and the last group at 12 weeks. And then each group was divided into 2 subgroups of 6 rabbits each for the control and the experimental. So the experimental group was repeatedly submitted to compression each week for a total of 3 weeks, while the control group wasn't submitted to any kind of compression. So all the rabbits were submitted to a breaking of their mid-diaphyseal, which were stabilized with the external fixation, and they were all broken the same way. They were all under anesthesia, and it was all broken in a precise place, the exact place on every same rabbit. And so then there were some rabbits that presented pain-related complications that were excluded from the study. So the 36 number actually came down to 33 overall. And some of those pain-related complications included inflammation, fracture, pin loosening, and mechanical failure. So because of those 3 rabbits were excluded from the study and the results. And now into the results. They measured fracture load, toughness, and stiffness. So how they did this was, once they had those 3 different groups that were 12 for 3 weeks, 12 for 6 weeks, 12 for 12 weeks. And what they did was, at the end of the 3 weeks, they euthanized those rabbits and took their bones and did these tests to measure the fracture load, toughness, and stiffness of the bone. So, and then they compared them. So the control group to the experimental group, they compared their results. So for 3 weeks, all of the p-values for fracture load, toughness, and stiffness were significantly different. So the compression had a great effect compared to not doing any kind of compression on the bone healing process. And the same goes for 6 weeks. So in the beginning, the 3 and 6 weeks, the compression had a great effect on speeding up that bone healing process. But when you get to about 12 weeks, story wasn't exactly the same. There wasn't much of a difference. The compression, between the compression and not compression, it was about the same, except for stiffness. So the results by comparison over time of the 3 variables showed a significant effect in the variables, but the bone healing process was faster in the experimental than the control group overall, which is basically what the results are saying. Sorry. Alright, so in conclusion, in 6 weeks, the characteristics of the callus is superior in the experimental group compared to the control group. So by using compression, the callus is healed much quicker, which makes the repair stage much more rapid than without compression, which is why the healing process with compression is an ideal model of bone healing. And compression is a mechanic stimulator that influences the bone healing process in a positive way when it comes to time and quality features. So that compression actually has a major effect on the repair stage of the process. So compression actually greatly affected how quickly and how greatly the bone was healing. It actually increased the osteoids to make the bone stronger and more rigid. And some of the strengths and limitations of the study were the strengths. Multiple results over different time periods, so they measured at 3 weeks and 6 weeks and 12 weeks, which is great because it takes about 6 to 12 weeks for a bone to heal. And then they had multiple professionals on the study. They had 5 different doctors who were all doctors of they were all orthopedic experts. So to have those 5 different professionals working on the study was great. And then some limitations that the study had was they had a small amount of participants, the 33 rabbits used overall. It's not a large amount to measure and get accurate results. So they could have used more participants to make the study better. Another thing that happened was prolonged application. So for the rabbits at 12 weeks, say their bone had already healed by 8 weeks, that prolonged application had such a negative effect on them because prolonged application of external fixation over the time period that it took for the fracture to heal, it doesn't allow the bone to return to a natural environment. So because the bone didn't get back to range of motion and moving once it was already healed, it could have affected and made the bone weaker, which could have affected the results, which is probably an explanation for, not probably, it is the explanation for why the fracture load and the toughness were so close together between the control and the experimental group at 12 weeks. So take home points for you guys. The 3 main stages of bone healing: inflammation, which is the first 1 to 2 weeks; repair, which is the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's the most important stage of bone healing; and remodeling, which takes months to even years. And you guys have adequate strength after 3 to 6 months. And then also something else to note is bone biochemistry. What elements make up the bone, the weight of the bone, the calcium phosphate, the water, and that it's organic and inorganic elements, like it's a mix. And also you guys should take home should note that the effects that compression has on the bone healing process. So compression for the first 3 and 6 weeks on the bone healing process was greatly significant and helped really improve the quality of the bone. and sped up the time frame that it took for the bone to heal. It really made the repair stage go that much quicker. So I have a question for you guys. Have any of you ever broken a bone? If so, what bone? And do you remember how long it took to heal? Did it take you 6 weeks? Was it that quick? What did it take? 12 weeks? Did it take longer than 12 weeks? Did you have to have surgery? Just answer whatever you're comfortable with. Let me know in the discussion board. That would be great. And if you guys have any more questions, also post them in the discussion board. Again, I will answer them as soon as I can. I hope you all are staying safe and staying healthy, and I hope to see you all in the spring. So have a great day.